Greg,
Yeah.
what is the perspective you bring to this conversation, and what's the lived experience, the academia that lends itself to that perspective?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of that fitting in, and I relate to a lot what you're saying, Alok, about people's challenges. Now, what's interesting to me about this whole discussion, since I'm a Christian, and I understand the world from a theistic perspective because I think it's the best explanation for the way things are.
Just to give a definition to that, theistic, what does that mean?
A personal God.
A God.
There is a personal God who is involved with the world. He made the world and he still maintains activity, as opposed to deistic, which just wound up the clock and let it go, okay? So my view is God is still involved. In fact, so involved that he actually came to earth in the person of Jesus of Nazareth to create a rescue plan. Now, what's interesting to me about this broader question, we can get into more details too, is that it's not, if there is a God who made the world for a purpose with meaning, people can participate in that meaning and purpose even if they don't know God. They won't be experiencing what they were made for, which is to be in friendship with him, with the plan that he's made for their flourishing. But they still can flourish in some measure insofar as they touch on these objective features. But insofar as we are able, even without belief in God, to kind of get in that groove of the things that God made us for, the purposes that he intends, in light of being made like him in some way in his image, there's going to be a measure of satisfaction. But what they'll be missing is the ultimate, and that is that friendship with God and being restored in that.
So, Greg, I know there's some things there that you said, big picture, broad strategy, but that got left out.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you want to add to that?
It's interesting watching it again because two things stand out for me. One is when you construct a kind of a game plan, a strategic game plan. That's the big picture, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
The tactical elements are the interaction with the people, but the big picture is what you're trying to accomplish. The strategic thing, there were a couple of things that I wanted to do. One of them is to continue to emphasize a line that was there in that first cut, that the Christian view of reality, the biblical take on reality, is the best explanation for the way things are.
Yeah.
And I actually, in 5 hours, I repeated that a number of times because I'm trying to make the point in defense of Christianity that it has explanatory power with regards to the world as we experience it.
Yeah.
All right? Then I was going to make a second point, and the more broader point, and I was attached to it a secondary point that wasn't as significant. They included the secondary point, but not the broader point. So my main point was this. The reason that we have these statistics is because people, all 90% of Brits, or young Brits or whatever, have no meaning, purpose, whatever, however he characterized it. And we're all familiar with those kinds of statistics because many of us are experiencing that. What's it all about? Right, is because we have been cut free from our mooring. And when we're cut free from our mooring, then we're going to be subject to every storm that comes by because there's no mooring for us. And we need to be reattached to our mooring.
Yeah.
And I mentioned in the introduction that Augustine has said, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. So now I'm making an existential point here about the feeling of restlessness that we have, and Augustine identifying God as the source. And that was the point I was trying to make. And more broadly, I wanted to make the point that when it comes to meaning and purpose, and I did make this point, but this is what got left out, you have one of two choices. Either there is objective meaning and purpose follows from it, or not. And if there is no objective meaning, then it's whatever. Then it's a crapshoot. You know, you could be Mother Teresa, you could be Drake the sex slave trader or whatever, and you can't make a moral distinction between them. So it's either objective or subjective. Now, my claim is that it's objective. That's the best explanation for the way things are, and we know this. The fact that I mentioned this, that we're all gathered around here together talking about the possibility, what is meaning and purpose, is itself an evidence that there is a meaning or purpose to be found. We are hungering for it. And so that was the point. That laid the stage. And I wanted to continue to kind of beat that drum objective or subjective, objective or subjective. Objective, real meaning, significant purpose. Now, the point that they left in there was a much more secondary point, and what I wanted to say is, look, even if you don't believe in God and you don't understand the grounding of meaningful life, if God made humans for a particular purpose so that we would flourish, if you participate in those purposes, you will still flourish in some measure. So I'm not saying you can never be satisfied unless you believe in God. God made the world a certain way, and you operate the way he made it, like marriage, for example, and family. You operate that way, you're going to be more satisfied, you're going to flourish, even if you don't believe in God. They kept that in there, and I'm glad that was in there. But it was the secondary point. The larger one was the point, what is it? Objective or not? And if not objective, subjective, and then it's a crapshoot.
Because you're not saying that if you don't believe in God or you're not a Christian, you can't flourish in some way.
Right. I'm not saying that.
Now, I'm interested in what you think about the broad strategy that Dr. K had and Alex had. So you were trying to set the stage. It's either object or it's not. Do you think Alex agreed with you on that? Dr. K, was he even having the same conversation? Because it seemed at times like there was two separate conversations happening.
This is one of the biggest frustrations for me is because this conversation was not linear. Now, our friend Wes Huff, Joe Rogan, him and Joe, back and forth. And so you kind of stay on a topic pretty well. Here we have four people, and two of them talking a lot between themselves, Alex and Dr. K. And sometimes I couldn't even get into that discussion because it's hard to break in. And you got to think always of the optics. How do you get in? Well, you could just barge in. Well, that's not very polite. Then it's going to make you look bad, right? So I'm thinking all the time about how I maneuver and make my points if I'm able to. And sometimes I'm thinking, oh, make a note here. I got something to say about that. And then 5 minutes later, I get in, kind of thing. So this is a frustration. Even viewers have mentioned that same thing. And when it comes to this issue of meaning and purpose, remember the distinction between objective and subjective. Alex is stuck with subjective. He knows that because he's an atheist. There is no objective meaning or purpose. It's just molecules clashing in the universe. Everything's designed, as it were, by the blind watchmaker of natural selection and mutation, the evolutionary story. And so he's got nothing. And there were many times where he was actually pressed on that issue, even by Stephen. So what would you say? And he goes, I don't know. Because there is nothing there. I call, and this is not disparagement, this is description. I call atheism the nothing option. What caused everything? Nothing. What is life about? Nothing. What is the meaning of life? Nothing. You know, what is man's problem? Man has no problem. How do you fix it? You don't fix what's not broken. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And so, in a certain sense, as the atheist, he's locked into merely subjective responses. Now, Dr. K, thank you. He is in a different situation because he believes in a transcendent reality. He's a mixture kind of Eastern religions. So he's making reference to this much of the time, some of the time, especially towards the end. But in the beginning, he's kind of rejecting the idea that he knows anything about.
That's right.
Objective meaning, big T truth, big M meaning, big P purpose. He's just looking at what are modalities he can use in a clinical setting to help people who are feeling suicidal find meaning for themselves. Now, this is completely subjective.
Totally.
And by the way, there were a lot of points I thought that were helpful. You know, you organize your life, you drop back 60,000 feet, take a look at, this too shall pass. And so there's good recommendations that were given there. But notice that everything that he ends up saying is all on the subjective side. It's the utilitarian side. Here's what works. And I miss some opportunities, especially when the theological side, spiritual side was developed a little bit, given his Hindu mindset, essentially, that God exists. And that's the ground of reality, but everything else is an illusion, Maya in their terms. I missed the opportunity of asking just very directly. So let me see if I understand this, Dr. K. On your view, everything else is illusion but God himself, and therefore all these distinctions are illusory. That would include the distinction between good and evil. Is that your understanding? That ultimately there is no distinction between good and evil. Now that's that view.
Yeah.
And I would be curious how he actually responded to that, but I know the answer to it. So what's interesting is there was a lot of discussion, we'll get to it, on the whole issue of evil and suffering and that kind of stuff. Okay, Alex especially brought it up.
Yeah.
But I'm the only one in a position of anybody in that discussion, considering that Stephen is kind of laying on the sideline, just asking questions. I'm the only one in that discussion that could make legitimate distinctions between good and evil, given my worldview. Alex certainly can't.
Yeah.
And nor can Alok, Dr. K, because of his Hindu Maya mindset.
Yeah.
The irony is, in both cases, and we'll get to this, both of them used moral language to describe things.
Yeah.
Even when Alex was trying really hard not to, he couldn't avoid it. And my answer to that is, this gets back to the best explanation, is because I owe this insight to Francis Schaeffer. God actually made the world that we live in. And we are human beings made in the image of God. And even if we run from God, we can't run from ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to say things that are true about the world, even when our philosophy denies that thing that we can't help saying.
Yeah.